Morning, everybody. It is 11 o'clock, and I think in the interest of not in keeping everyone on time, because I'm sure you've taken some time out of your busy days to join this here, I'm happy to kick off, and I'll keep admitting people as they arrive. Okay, so I'll first start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, water and community. So wherever that may be, I think a lot of you are in New South Wales on lots of different areas, no doubt, in country. So today I really want to thank Leanne Ovington, who is, I can see she is on the call. We met recently at the National Nursing Forum in Adelaide for the Australian College of Nursing conference. And she spoke about, she came and spoke to us about all the things that you're all faced with in terms of trying to manage and work through workforce shortages. And I thought it was interesting that, well, not a lot of people actually know who ANMAC is. So we're the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council. And the organisation is split in two. So we've got the accreditation function and then we've got the skills assessment function. So I'll introduce you to that function today and walk through what it is we do and how the work we do helps your employees and, you know, in essence, helps you. So there is a chat function that I do urge you to use. There's a chat box there up on your screen. I won't answer as we go, but I'll definitely come back to them at the end of the session. We've allowed an hour. I can probably talk for about half an hour, and they've probably got a good 30 minutes for questions if that's where it takes us. We have recorded this. We are very happy to share this, as well as sharing the slides with you all after the presentation. We can certainly send them around to each of you that have registered. And you will have all noticed you are muted. And I think all your cameras have been turned off as well. So I can't see anyone. I can just see circles. That's all right. All right. So you probably all know this. Don't really want to teach you how to suck eggs, but healthcare regulation is just about setting a standard for service delivery. And it includes the accreditation of individuals and organisations, which essentially is the work that we do here at ANMAC. So the accreditation of individuals goes to the skilled migration component when it comes to internationally qualified nurses and midwives, or even overseas born. We do see a lot of applicants who have actually wholly and solely qualified in Australia. And then organisations, the accreditation of organisations. So you would all know hospital accreditation, that's not us. We actually accredit education programs that lead to nursing and midwifery registration in Australia. So that part of the business, the accreditation function, is funded by the Nursing Midwifery Board of Australia, so the Australian government. We thought we'd just pop this up here, 3 main entities that you really need to remember and really, if you can, remember the difference between us. So ANMAC is a standalone. We're a not-for-profit. We aren't government. AHPRA, on the other hand, it's like AHPRA is like the big umbrella, and underneath the umbrella are all the health boards. So you've got your nurses, your midwives, your doctors, your paramedics, your dentists, your physios. They all sit underneath the AHPRA umbrella. There is lots of people do get AHPRA and ANMAC confused. The good old A in everything, obviously, because of Australia, but it is confusing. So if you can remember that ANMAC is the Skills Assessment and Accreditation Council. The Accreditation Council does take away a little bit from the skilled migration function. But yeah, ANMAC and AHPRA are 2 different entities. We do 2 different things. Doesn't want to. Next slide. Oh, what's happened? Oh, hello. Oh, hello. I don't know what's happening. I've lost all my screens. Can someone give me a thumbs up in the chat to tell me, oh, okay, I'm back. Am I back? Hang on, sorry, team. Thanks, Marianne. Oh, goodness. Hang on, I'm just going to have to pull up my presentation again. Good old technology. I was so confident. Oops. My computer has just slowed right down. Okay, I'm getting there. Sorry, everyone. Right, here we are. It doesn't want to present, it just wants to sit there. All right, I'm going to go back to where I was up to. My computer's now telling me I need to restart. I'm not going to do that. If I do drop out again, I don't actually know how to recover from that. And it doesn't want to go to presentation, but I'm hoping you can all still see where we're up to. So ANMAC's role as an assessing authority. We're an independent assessing authority, so we're gazetted by the Australian government to undertake skills assessments under the General Skilled Migration Program. We're also involved in quite a few committees, different committees like Industry Critical Friends. So we're on where we have high-level talks with ministers in relation to the work that we do here in skilled migration. Thank you, Liam, fabulous IT assistant. And there we go. So that's the work of skilled migration. And like I said before, we're not a government agency. We are not for profit. We are not an employer. And we have nothing to do with registration directly. When I say that, that's because the accreditation function, so the education programs that we accredit, do end up on the approved programs of study list with the Nursing Midwifery Board of Australia. Okay, skilled migration services. So what did we do? We look at qualifications obtained by our applicants. So typically they are enrolled nurses, registered nurses and midwives. Mostly internationally qualified, but I did say before quite a few are wholly and solely registered here in Australia. So they've made the decision to move out here and they need a skills assessment post completion of their degree to progress with their migration. We also, as of mid-June this year, started assessing personal care assistants and nursing support workers. I've only put that here. I'm not going to talk to that today, but that's another significant piece of work that is linked to the aged care industry labour agreement with the Australian government. So we will be running webinars on that in the future as it grows. And so far we've had a pretty significant uptake from applicants who are overseas and know that they won't meet the registration requirements yet. So what we're seeing is they're coming over here, working in aged care and then topping up their skills to eventually become registered. So that's an interesting pipeline for these nurses. So for these, I'm going to assume the majority of you are actually employers. So you're looking at filling, basically meeting workforce needs. And in speaking to Leanne, she did say that you've got some recruiters and they're overseas and you're trying to bring nurses from overseas to Australia. So the first thing we're suggesting is get the registration process underway. Depending on the country that these nurses and midwives are coming from, the registration process may be straightforward. But if, for example, they're coming from countries like the Philippines, India, Nepal, and then depending on what nursing qualifications they have in their home country, they're going to have to step through quite a longer registration process that involves the multiple choice questionnaire, the online exam, and then the face-to-face clinical assessment. So that's the biggest piece of work. So we do know that there are some bottlenecks with the NMBA, and my understanding is they're working quite hard to reduce that, to bring as many over as quickly as possible. But that is I suppose the key piece here is, if you take anything away from today, is get that, as soon as you've secured someone, get that registration process happening. Then they step through the migration skills assessment process with us. Obviously, this is the work that we do. So, and I'm the Director of Skill Migration Service. I didn't actually introduce myself at the end. Apologies for at the beginning. Apologies for that. So I have a team of about 14 assessors, and we are assessing these applications that are made online to us. People upload information, and then we'll make an assessment based on, we look at qualifications, work experience, and then we issue them with an outcome that helps them progress on their migration journey. That's quite a short process in the scheme of things. So we're looking at between 4 and 6 weeks for that. And then they need to sort out their visa application with the Department of Home Affairs. So they're the 3 key steps for nurses coming from overseas. And I'm talking specifically here about sponsorship, because I do know that was essentially what Leanne was saying, that you're sponsoring a whole lot of these nurses. What do we have to do in order to prepare them and set them up for success to actually get them working on the floor here in Australia? Like I said earlier, we can share these slides around. I've just popped this slide up just before we started the webinar today. So this is in relation to the NMBA, and whilst I am not from the NMBA, this is on their website. So we've put down there that where to go, so nursingmidwiferyboard.gov.au. It talks about the streams. So there's 3 different streams for registration. So I'm not going to go into them, but you can see that stream B, obviously there's more steps, so it's going to take longer. And with stream C, it's actually, it looks like there's only 1 step, but it's actually because they'll be likely recommended to go and continue study. So top up bachelor degree at a university, or do a TAFE course from scratch. I'm going to throw Chris Montgomery. He's one of our colleagues from the Department of Home Affairs. I'm really impressed to see that he's joined us today. Hi, Chris. So I'll just leave that there. So if you have any questions in relation to the registration process, you will need to go to the Nursing Midwifery Board of Australia, but they are very, quite responsive, and I do believe their registration process makes sense, and they will be able to talk you through it better than I will, because obviously I'm not from the NMBA. Okay, so we offer 3 different types of skills assessments. I suppose, so the difference here is, the distinguishing factor here is where they're at in the ARPA registration process. So if they've got current registration in Australia and their name appears on the register, they're eligible to apply for the modified skills assessment. If they're partway through the process with ARPA, the NMBA, and they've received a letter saying they're eligible for registration, they just need to present in person, they're eligible to apply for the modified plus skills assessment. Then we've got the nurses and midwives who have got minimum bachelor level qualifications from the UK, Canada, Ireland, the US and Hong Kong. They can apply directly to us. So that kind of goes against what I was talking about before in terms of steps, key steps, but it does mean you could do these simultaneously. So if you've got nurses coming from the UK, they can be applying for registration at the same time as doing a full skills assessment with UNPAck. This is because we know that those qualifications from those countries will definitely get registration in Australia. There are other qualifications, for example, a bachelor in nursing from Aga Khan University in Pakistan, that tends to lead to registration directly. But because the formal advice we've received from the NMBA is the UK, Canada, US, Hong Kong and Ireland, we do ask that only those applicants apply. So there are, certain countries from certain universities that do meet that criteria, but our commitment is to just these 5 countries here. Just quickly, the ANMAC application and assessment steps. So the applicant or the migration agent, someone acting on their behalf, is responsible for making the application. So that includes creating portal access on the ANMAC website, completing the application form and making payment. Of the payments were on the previous slide. I think the highest fee is $595. We've got basically the application process is all online. So they have to upload documentation to support their claim. So for example, they're saying they've got a qualification from a university in India. We ask that they upload their graduation certificate and transcript from that. If they've done the OSCE here in Australia with APRA, we also ask for evidence of that. We also ask for passport, copy of passport photo, evidence basically of them being who they say they are. Then we also, they can claim points when they get to their visa process with the Department of Home Affairs. So we do assess claims of work experience. I'll come to that later on in the presentation. But essentially we ask for those professional references to be uploaded at that point in time as well. The assessors will get to the assessment in application order. So if you apply, you go in a queue essentially. You've got a couple of weeks to upload your documents, and then we will assess. We might ask a few more questions, ask for a little bit more evidence, but at the end of the day, it should result in an outcome letter from ANMAC, which will then be used to progress the visa application process. So like I said before, that takes between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on the quality of the documents that are uploaded and whether or not we've received all the information that we need. What evidence is needed? I've touched on that, so I can kind of briefly take you through that. The English language test requirement is only for the full skills assessment. So that's the third assessment type that I talked about before. They're the ones that are in one of those top 5 source countries. And then there's information on our website about what we accept. So we accept the 4 different test types: TOEFL, IELTS, PTE and OET. And we do accept results from 2 test sittings taken within 6 months of each other. And we've also recently committed to the 1 skill retake, which is something that IELTS offer. We don't accept online tests. And so all that information is on our website. So if you do have any questions in relation to that, pop that in the chat and we can address them at the end of this. In relation to the other documents, I've got a few examples here that if I click on something, it should work. My screen's not doing it again. Why is it frozen? Just going to stop sharing for a moment and see if I can go back in. Sorry, everyone. It's always tech. Okay. All right. What is it doing? What about that? Maybe I'll just sit on that because then I can scroll through. Sorry, everyone. So we can see, I'll just quickly flick through. Passport, we asked for the biodata page. We've obviously, for obvious reasons, blanked out a whole lot of stuff on that there. Passport photos, look, we want a clear shot of the face front on. We don't really want anything else in the image. So there's your examples there. Graduation documents, so we're looking for the actual graduation certificate and then the transcripts. We're also, I'll come back to the professional references in a moment, but that's essentially what we're after there. So there's an example of an international one there and one from Greenslopes Private Hospital, which I think is part of Ramsay there. And then, and I've already referenced the English language results. So if you've got any questions about the documentation requirements, do pop them in the chat and I can address them shortly. In relation to ANSCO codes, Leanne, this is one of the things that you brought up with me when we were chatting in Adelaide. It's a classification system used by the Australian government. It is quite complex. My aim today is to try and kind of undo that a little bit, because it isn't really. It's quite simple. If it's an area that, so for example, you run a mixed medical surgical ward and you're sponsoring an applicant, you just need to determine where their skills are. So if is it more medical or surgical, and you would nominate that depending on what your arrangement is with government in terms of sponsorship. I'll come to that a little bit more. That's one of our commonly asked questions. You would nominate, because we need to basically make sure the applicant has got experience in that clinical area at that time. We do also have on the UNMAC YouTube channel a funky little what is an ANSCO video, which we have put up on our socials, I don't know, in the last couple of months. So that's kind of handy to wrap your head around, particularly when it comes to the generic ANSCO code, which is 254499, which is the one that a lot of people, probably 50% of our applicants, will nominate the generic ANSCO code. All right, so I've tried to, I've had to think about, when I was putting this presentation together, I've had to think about the questions that we get answered, and also going off the conversation that I've had with a couple of you in recent times. So I'll just step through them. Just so you know, I can't see any of the questions coming in, so we'll go back to them. So if hopefully I'm answering some of them in this, but we've got only a couple more slides to go, and then we'll start answering some questions. The first one, do I have to nominate a specific code if my employer is sponsoring me? So what we often see is a bit of a disconnect between the applicant's understanding of the skills assessment process and the employer's understanding of the skills assessment process and the visa process. So the answer is yes, you do. They do need to nominate a specific code. So as I touched on before, if you're a surgical ward and you're sponsoring someone with a surgical ANSCO, you need to make sure your employee knows that, so that when they're lodging their skills assessment, they know to nominate the surgical ANSCO code. The reason that is an issue is once we've finished the skills assessment, the applicant moves on to their visa application, and they might nominate a different code to what you're sponsoring them under. And so then that creates issues with Home Affairs, and that further delays the processing of the visa. So we just ask that that's kind of communicated and understood, that the applicant understands where that's coming from. I must also say that if you are sponsoring a nurse, for example, as a surgical nurse, ANSCO 254424, they need to have a minimum of 3 months work experience in a surgical area in order to be allocated the surgical ANSCO code. We need to be satisfied that as part of the assessment, we look to make sure the code we're allocating, that person actually has skills in that clinical area. So that's really important. If I'm being sponsored in a specific area, do I need to have work experience in that area to be allocated that specific ANSCO code? So that's what I just said before. So yes, you do. That they need to have a minimum of 3 months work, minimum 3 months, 20 hours per week. So it doesn't actually equate to a lot of hours, but it's enough for us to be satisfied that they've been boots on the ground, learning the skills, understanding what the environment's like, what the pressures are, and what those specific skill sets are. If I already have a skills assessment from UNMAC, can I get the ANSCO code changed if my employment conditions change and I'm being sponsored? I do know we have someone on the call who I've been working with in the background on this. The example in this case is a paediatric nurse, so a nurse from overseas who is being sponsored as a paediatric nurse working in a neonatal intensive care unit. So here at UNMAC, we would receive a professional reference and we would assess its contents, which I'll come to shortly in terms of what it is we're looking for. But essentially, it's about clinical skills and competencies. So you would all know that a NICU is looking after babies. And we would consider, because of the skill set, for it to meet the criteria for both critical care and emergencies. So it's about having those, more intensive, those really specific clinical skills to work in a critical care environment, but also would meet the requirements for a paediatric nurse. So I think in this instance, the applicant came to us, was assessed as a critical care nurse based on her NICU experience. And then the employer has realised there's a mismatch and that actually they need to change the ANSCO code on their outcome letter. So we're in the process of fixing that up now for that applicant. So that is part of our process, which I didn't touch on earlier, but it's called a reissue. And once an applicant has received its letter, their letter from ANMAC, it's valid for 2 years. So they can come back to us for an ANSCO code change or to add periods of work experience within that 2 years. So this nurse will get the change to paediatric and will be able to continue with her visa, with her sponsorship with her employer. I work in a mixed ward. Does it matter which ANSCO code I nominate? It does. It needs to align with the sponsorship, with the ANSCO code on the sponsorship. Touched on that before. So like the mixed ward, medical, surgical, where do their skills? They need to meet the skill set. So if it's if you're a nurse working on a mixed medical surgical ward, it's okay for them to have had a medical background. We can still allocate the medical ward as long as they're being sponsored as a medical. And I'm happy after this to have that conversation with people and to help you kind of work through that if you need to. I work in a high dependency ward. Do I nominate the critical care code or a medical ward, or a medical code? Do I nominate the critical care code, or I should say a medical code, or something else? So once again, that comes to the detail in the professional reference, and whether or not we can determine within that where their skill set sits. So, some high dependency wards are closer to being like an intensive care. Others are like being an emergency department where they're on a cardiac monitor. So it would just depend on the level of detail in the professional reference. And the final question here, I work in a geriatric ward in an acute care hospital. Can I nominate aged care or is it medical? Once again, it comes to detail in the professional reference. Last year, we went through we had about 2,000 requests for reissues in the space of a couple of months. And that was about applicants having, there was an opportunity, there were a whole lot of invites, I think it was Victoria or Queensland, for aged care nurses, so registered nurses working in aged care. And we had a whole lot of requests for reissues to go from, say, a surgical initially issued surgical code in their letter, all wanting aged care and saying, I look after an old person, therefore I'm eligible for aged care. So it would come down to the description of the ward that they work in and what is the average age and how many patients do they really look after that meet the aged care, that fit within the aged care criteria. I will also say in relation to ANSCO codes, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, so they own the ANSCO classification system. There's some really good descriptors on their website for ANSCO codes. So if you're not sure, you can always refer to that, to their website, and that'll be able to kind of guide you with the code that your employee should be nominating. So that's it from the question side of things. I just want to talk a little bit. Oh my gosh, it's done it again. No, it hasn't. All right. Providing a professional reference. More and more, like I'm talking daily, we receive questionable professional references, both from claims of work here in Australia and claims of work internationally. Every single claim of work experience that is submitted to ANMAC, an attempt is made to verify it. So I'm sure quite a few of you online have probably received emails from ANMAC now asking you to verify that you've written and signed something, signed a letter, essentially, that you've written, hopefully. It's a bit disconcerting, the number of applicants that are submitting professional references that they've written themselves and perhaps forged a signature or made up the name of a referee, made up a NMW, a nursing registration number. So I just thought I'd step through what our requirements are and just really drive home the need to discourage applicants from writing their references. Obviously, don't sign a reference you haven't written, because fraud is on the increase, and it is our job. It is our job to make sure our outcomes of the skills assessments, are the best that they can be. So if you are writing a professional reference, we essentially need detail that's going to help us determine the relevance to the ANSCO code and their suitability for the purposes of skilled migration. Dates and hours of employment. So we have parameters around what periods of work we can report on. Australian periods of work need to be a minimum of 1 year, and overseas need to be a minimum of 3. Clinical skills and competencies, so I've touched on that. So if they're working in if they're working in an intensive care unit, we essentially want to know that they can care for intubated patients on inotropes and all of the other things that your intensive care unit may or may not provide. May provide. We also see a lot of value in reading that the applicant's receiving some ongoing and relevant CPD. And we do also ask that your work email address is in the letter, because we will come back asking for that to the applicant if it's not there, so that we can contact the referee. If there isn't, we also do other background checks. So we will, if we're not satisfied with the email address that we're provided by the referee, there are other avenues that we will go down to try and verify that. So fraud, I'll just quickly touch on fraud. It's a crime, and it's defined as a false representation of facts. Unfortunately, we've had quite a few people submit statutory declarations with information on it that's incorrect. So we spend a bit of time educating our applicants on what they should and shouldn't do. Some examples of some of the fraud we've seen at UNPAC. The most common one is falsified professional references, including false dates of employment and forged signatures. We've just had one today. We've finalised an appeal this morning from someone who submitted a professional reference purported to have been written by a nurse in the UK. We sent her an email, and she came back to us and said, "I've never seen this before in my life." It was a professional reference from a hospital on what looked like hospital letterhead with her name and signature. So the applicant is obviously devastated that we have found him unsuitable for the purposes of skilled migration, and the Department of Home Affairs has been informed. This is our job, and we will continue to verify all claims that come to us. Altered English language test results. We recently saw some IELTS results come through to us that at first glance looked okay, but we do an online verification check, and sure enough, there was no record of that applicant in the system. I've touched on this here. Confirmed fraud will result in an unsuitable outcome. The applicant is locked out for 2 years. So if you're trying to, get boots on the ground and people on your floors working, and they are found to have submitted non-genuine documentation, that will prevent them from having a skills assessment for another 2 years. And as I said earlier, the Department of Home Affairs is also notified, and we work quite closely with them to ensure that, what we're doing is still best practice, and we get quite regular feedback from them about the work that we do. So that's the fraud piece. This is just a quick snapshot of what the skills assessment outcome letter looks like. It has all the bits and pieces. It's got a unique identifier that only the Department of Home Affairs has. So we have it and the Department of Home Affairs have it. We have recently had confirmation from Home Affairs. They came to us and said, can you confirm that this was issued by you or not? It looked like our skills assessment. It had my signature on it, but it had a different LOD number. And in actual fact, the LOD number and the reference number belong to two different applicants. So that person got caught out. So I think that's it. I've just put up here Skilled Migration Services contact details. I would like to sorry, I've got someone sitting behind me who's talking to me. She's just telling me there are some questions in the chat. I'll just open them up. Oh, right, yes. Thank you, Hayley. What is the cost involved with a reissue? It's $145, and they can have up to 2 reissues in a 2-year period. So what we do see is a bit of a scramble, particularly when it's coming to the end of the 2-year period that it's valid for. We have had some preliminary discussions with the Department of Home Affairs about extending the validity period, and we're kind of waiting for a little bit more advice on that. But we're a little bit reluctant to extend the validity, reissue the skills assessment if they've got less than 3 months, validity left on the letter. That's because I'm aware Home Affairs have got some parameters around how much of an expiry date they can have on the skills assessment outcome letters. Another question here from Tracy. What is the benefit of being allocated the generic ANSCO code? There's not really, well, the benefit is if you nominate the generic ANSCO code, you don't need to submit a professional reference. So if you've got applicants coming from overseas that literally need a skills assessment to do to progress their visa application and they don't need points or anything towards their visa, then you could just nominate the generic ANSCO code, and it's just about us receiving that their proof of who they say they are and their qualification, including exams and bridging or whatever. Hayley has just said there, thank you. Does the expiry remain the same or does it? No, it doesn't extend the expiry. So currently it's 2 years locked in. We don't even have the functionality to extend the 2 years beyond 2 years from the date of original issue. But that may change in the future. I think as wait time, so I think in the past, the reason they've kind of come up to the end of the expiry on the LOD is perhaps because of the length of time it's taking for the Department of Home Affairs to process visas, So that's becoming less of an issue. It's my understanding. So we're certainly seeing less requests for reissues or less inquiries about extending the validity of the LOD. So they just need to basically, if they're running out of time and they feel they need a new one, they have to apply for a new one, which is essentially starting the process all over again. Okay, no problem, Hayley. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anything that I haven't touched on that you'd like to explore with me while I'm here? Is there interest in you all? Do you want a copy of the slides? Do you want, is there anything else? Is there anything missing? Do you have any questions that you would like me to help you with? Okay, great. Coming up, Hayley. We'll email this through after the presentation. Okay, too easy. It's so weird. I can't see faces and I can't hear voices. Is that it? Is everyone happy then? Yep, yep, excellent. Love it. Tell your friends, by all means, flick us an email. Most of you should have my email address. If not, skilledmigration@anmac.org.au. My team are online 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. on the phone. We've got a call centre 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. every single day. There's not much, like, you can seriously ring and it'll get picked up within like no more than a couple of minutes. So if it's a quick question you've got, you'll be able to reach somebody between the hours of 10 and 4. Otherwise, send us an email. We did shut the office for 2 days this week, and I think we came back to close to 400 emails. So my team are furiously trying to work through them today to catch up. But we're here to help, and that's essentially why I said to Leanne that I would run this today. I think the more that we can help you get people on the ground sooner, the better for everybody. So please do not hesitate to contact us. I'm being told here by the wonderful Viviana, who's my marketing and comms, that we will be running a webinar. Leanne, I'll update you on the date now live, the 28th of September at 5 p.m. This is going to be for employees. So if you've got a cohort of potential employees coming from overseas, you might suggest that they jump on. If you've got recruiters, maybe they jump on as well, so they can better understand the process. We'll send that webinar information to all of you as well, so you can share that amongst your networks. But yeah, look, very happy to help you, assist you, answer your questions at any time, and I really appreciate you all taking time out of your day. You've got 20 minutes of free time. I will let you get back to your day. Thank you. Bye, everybody.